In the stillness of a vast golden desert, where the wind whispered through endless dunes and the sun cast shimmering light across the lonely sands, the traveler trudged onward with heavy footsteps and a heavier heart. His name was Zaid, a man once surrounded by noise, comfort and company, but now swallowed by silence, solitude, and scorching heat. He had set out on this journey not to discover a place, but to discover himself. He was searching not for water, not for shelter, but for peace. Yet peace seemed farther away than any oasis. The journey had begun when his life fell apart. His business failed, his friends disappeared, and his heart became clouded with questions. Why do good people suffer? Why does Allah test us? Is it possible to feel peace when life feels like a storm? The weight of his worries felt like a mountain on his chest. One night, unable to bear the turmoil, he packed a small bag, left his home silently, and walked into the unknown desert, hoping that silence would answer what noise could not. Days passed. His throat burned, his skin cracked, and his legs trembled, but something deeper inside kept pushing him forward. He had no map, no guide, only his thoughts and his faith, which flickered like a weak candle in a windy night. Every now and then he whispered, "Ya Allah, guide me." But even those words felt dry, like the desert itself. One evening, when the sun sank into the horizon, painting the sky with hues of red and gold, Zaid collapsed beside a dune. The sand was still hot, but his body could no longer fight. He felt dizzy, exhausted, and defeated. He looked at the sky, tears sliding down his dry cheeks, and whispered, "Why am I here? Why did you bring me here?" The sky remained silent. That night, the desert became cold, almost freezing. Zaid curled up under his torn blanket, trembling, his heart echoing with loneliness. Yet in that silence, something strange happened. He heard a faint whisper inside his heart, not from outside, but from within. It said, "When there is nothing left, there is Allah." He didn't know if it was his imagination or something deeper, but these words stayed with him. The next morning, Zaid stood again, weaker in body, but perhaps slightly stronger in spirit. He continued walking. With each step, he remembered the prophets who wandered in deserts, not in despair, but in trust. He remembered Prophet Musa alayhi salam, who escaped to the desert and found Allah's mercy. He remembered Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who meditated in solitude, seeking truth. He remembered Prophet Yunus alayhi salam, who found peace in the darkness of a whale's belly. And then he thought, if they found peace in their loneliness, maybe I will too. He started to make dua, not the rush duas he used to make back in his busy life, but calm, sincere, humble duas. He whispered, "Ya Allah, I am lost, not just in this desert, but in my heart. Show me the way. Even if it is not the way I want, show me the way you want." Time passed slowly, and Zaid felt emptiness, but no longer loneliness. The desert, which once felt like a prison, now felt like a teacher. It taught him patience. It taught him humility. It taught him that survival was not in his control, but in Allah's mercy. One afternoon, as he rested under the shade of a lonely desert tree, an elderly Bedouin walked toward him. The man had a gentle face, a peaceful smile, and eyes that seemed to have seen the world's secrets. Without a word, he offered Zaid water. Zaid drank, tears falling from his eyes, not just because of thirst, but because of gratitude. The old man sat beside him and said, "A desert tests every traveler. Some search for treasures, some search for peace. Which one are you looking for?" "We am searching for peace," Zaid replied. The old man smiled and said, "Peace is not found when life is perfect. Peace is found when your heart trusts Allah, even when life is not." These words sank deep into Zaid's heart. He asked, "But how? My life has been filled with loss and disappointment. How do I find peace in that?" The Bedouin looked at him and said, "Loss is not always a punishment. Sometimes it is a gift. Allah removes the world from your hands so that He can place Himself in your heart." The man stayed only a short while, but his words never left. That evening, Zaid took a deep breath and looked at the desert again, not as a harsh landscape, but as a mirror of life. It was empty but beautiful, difficult but peaceful. It had nothing, yet it had everything. just like faith. That night, he sat alone watching the stars. They were countless, shining quietly without making a sound. He thought, maybe peace doesn't roar. Maybe peace whispers. Maybe I was just too busy to hear it. He felt something he had not felt in a long time. A sense of calm. A strange, soft calmness that wrapped his heart gently, like a blanket in the cold desert night. Days passed, but now he walked differently. He walked not with fear, but with faith. He made dua, not with desperation, but with trust. He whispered, I don't know where I'm going, Ya Allah, but I know you are with me. And that sentence changed everything. One morning, as the sun rose, Zayd stood on a dune, looking at the horizon, and for the first time, he smiled. Not because he had reached his destination, but because he had discovered something more important. Allah had never left him. He was just too distracted to feel his presence. But something more was about to happen. Something that would show him just how close Allah's mercy really was. Something that would change his journey forever. He felt renewed, yet this renewal was gentle, like dawn light slowly spreading across a dark sky. He began to reflect on his past, not with bitterness, but with understanding. Every failure seemed to have a purpose now. Every loss had been a step toward this moment. He remembered how restless his life had been, constantly chasing success, recognition, and approval from others. But in the desert, everything was still. Everything was simple. And in that simplicity, he finally saw what truly mattered. Not applause, not wealth, not comfort, but connection. A connection with Allah, with his own soul, with silence, with gratitude. One evening, Zayd decided to climb a tall dune and sit at its peak. From there, he could see miles and miles of golden sand stretching endlessly in every direction. It felt majestic, yet humbling. He sat there for hours, watching shadows grow and fade as the sun journeyed across the sky. He closed his eyes and listened, not to noise, but to silence. And in that silence, he felt something profound. He was not alone. Even when no one was around, even when there was no sign of life, he felt a presence. A presence that comforted him, strengthened him, and whispered to his heart, Allah is near. That night, he made a new kind of dua. It was not a dua asking for things. It was not a dua complaining about his pain. It was a dua of a surrender. Ya Allah, he whispered softly, I don't ask you to change my situation anymore. I ask you to change my heart. Give me peace in whatever you write for me. It was the most peaceful dua he had ever made. The desert wind blew softly, and for the first time he did not feel it as a harsh gust, but as a gentle reminder that everything Allah sends has wisdom. He slept peacefully that night, under the starlit sky, not worried about tomorrow, because he had learned that peace was not found in certainty, but in trust. But Allah was not done teaching him. The next morning, Zayd discovered something in the sand, a small plant growing alone in the dry desert. It was fragile, delicate, and yet somehow it had survived in one of the harshest places on earth. He knelt beside it, amazed. How did you survive here? He whispered to the plant, knowing it could not answer him, yet understanding the message. Allah gives life even in the driest places. Allah gives hope even in despair. And Allah gives peace even in the heart of a storm. Zayd smiled, touched the plant gently, and thanked Allah for showing him that true strength was not in resisting hardship, but in growing through it. His journey was still not over, but now it had meaning. It had purpose. It had peace. He breathed deeply, feeling hope, calmness, gratitude, warmth, mercy, presence, faith, strength, and undeniable peace within his heart. Zayd stood quietly beside the fragile desert plant, staring at it as though it held the answers to the questions he had carried in his heart for years. It was small, barely noticeable, yet it stood firmly rooted in a place where survival felt impossible. That little plant was a message. Allah protects, nourishes, and strengthens even in the harshest of conditions. If Allah can take care of this tiny plant in an endless desert, he whispered, then he can surely take care of me. That moment did not solve his problems, but it healed something deeper. It restored his trust. As he continued walking, the desert felt different. Not because it had changed, but because he had. The sand was still hot, the sun still relentless, yet now there was a quiet peace inside. The journey was no longer a search for something outside. It was a homecoming to something within. The storms of his heart had begun to settle, not because life became easier, but because his faith became stronger. One afternoon he found a small rock where he sat to rest. He looked at the sky and thought about everything he had feared: failure, rejection, loneliness, loss. He realized that each of those things had brought him closer to Allah in a way comfort never could. He remembered the old Bedouin's words: sometimes Allah removes the world from your hands so that He can place Himself in your heart. He smiled as the meaning finally settled. True peace does not come after the journey ends, but during the journey, when the heart surrenders. As he sat in reflection, he heard a soft rustling sound. He looked up and saw a traveler approaching, riding a camel, wearing traditional desert clothing and carrying a water pouch. The traveler stopped beside Zayd and said, "Assalamu alaikum, brother. You look like a man who has been walking not just through the desert, but through life." Zayd smiled and replied, "Wa alaikum assalam. Both journeys are harder than I imagined, yet both are more beautiful than I expected." The traveler nodded, impressed by the wisdom in his voice. He asked, "What have you found in this desert?" Zayd thought for a moment and replied, "I came searching for answers, but I found something better. I found Allah's mercy in every step." The traveler offered him dates and water, and they sat under a rare acacia tree nearby. Silence settled between them, not a heavy silence, but a peaceful one. After some time, the traveler recited a verse softly, "And whoever has taqwa of Allah, He will make for him a way out and provide for him from where he does not expect." Zayd felt tears in his eyes again. Provision was not always food or water. Sometimes provision was peace. Sometimes provision was clarity. The traveler soon continued his own journey, but not before leaving Zayd with one last message. The desert tests every traveler differently. You were not sent here to be lost. You were sent here to be found. Those words echoed in his heart long after the traveler had gone. That evening, Zayd built a small fire, sat beside it, and watched the flames flicker softly against the darkening sky. The silence no longer frightened him. It calmed him. He prayed, not because he was desperate, but because he was grateful. He felt connected, not to a place, not even to his own strength, but to Allah, who had walked with him silently all along. Days later, as he followed new footprints in the sand, possibly left by the traveler he met, he saw something in the distance. At first, he thought it was a mirage, one of those illusions the desert plays on tired eyes. But as he got closer, he realized it was real. A small oasis lay ahead. Fresh water, a few palm trees, shade, life, and most importantly, peace. He did not run toward it. He walked. Slowly, gratefully, purposefully. When he arrived, he knelt beside the water and whispered, "I did not find this oasis. Allah brought me here." He drank slowly, letting the coolness flow through his body. But strangely, the most soothing thing was not the water touching his lips. It was tranquility touching his heart. He stayed at the oasis for 2 days, resting, praying, reflecting. And during that time, he realized something deeply profound. Sometimes Allah gives you what you need only after you stop chasing what you want. He had stopped chasing solutions and instead surrendered to trust. And that's when Allah sent blessings. One afternoon, while resting under a palm tree, birds chirping softly above him, he thought about going home. Not because he was tired, but because he was ready. He was no longer running from life. He was walking toward it, with faith as his compass. He gathered his few things and began his journey back. But this time, he was not searching for answers. He was carrying them. The desert, once a place of confusion, had now become a classroom. It had taught him patience, not by comfort, but by difficulty. It had taught him humility, not by praise, but by isolation. It had taught him trust, not by assurance, but by uncertainty. It had taught him that peace is not found when life is perfect, but when the heart is connected to Allah. When Zayd finally returned home weeks later, people were surprised. His clothes were worn and dusty, but his face glowed. calm, peaceful, content. Someone asked him, "Did you find what you were looking for?" He smiled gently and replied, "I did not find peace in the desert. I found it in the heart that trusts Allah, even in the desert." From that day onward, Zayd lived differently. He still faced challenges like everyone else, but he no longer faced them alone. Every time worry tried to return, he would close his eyes and remember the whisper he heard in the lonely desert night. When there is nothing left, there's Allah, and that was enough. So to anyone feeling lost like Zayd, lost in problems, lost in pain, lost in confusion, remember this: sometimes Allah takes you away from everything so that you can discover the one who is above everything. Sometimes Allah brings you into a desert, not to break you, but to awaken you. And when your heart truly understands this, you will realize you were never lost. You were simply being guided. Peace is not a place. Peace is not a perfect life. Peace is knowing that Allah is with you, even when no one else is. If this story touched your heart, remember, someone out there needs this reminder too. Like, share, comment your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more heart-touching Islamic stories that bring you closer to Allah. Until the next story, may Allah fill your heart with peace, mercy, and light.